Welcome once again to the class. Let's move on towards our next topic, that is major regional states during the 18th century India. Okay, we had learnt up to here that Bahadur Shah Zafar was a very good poet. We had learnt up to here that he used to write sher shairi because he had no work to do. We had learnt up to here, right? So major regional states during the 18th century India, we will learn about this right now. Okay, so the first one is Maratha Empire. The Maratha Empire, the most important regional power which emerged after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707. What happened in 1707? Aurangzeb died, right? In 1707 Aurangzeb died. So what happened after that? Let us understand. The most important regional power which emerged after his death, that is Aurangzeb's death in 1707, those were your Marathas basically. Okay, so under the able leadership of Peshwas. Okay, now who are Peshwas? Peshwas used to be the prime minister of Maratha king or Chhatrapati. There used to be a Maratha king which was called as who was called as Chhatrapati. Okay, so Peshwa was the prime minister of that Maratha king. If you have watched the Sony TV, once upon a time there used to be a serial on Sony called as Chandragupta Maurya. Okay, so there was one Amatya Rakshas in that Chandragupta Maurya serial. Okay, who was the prime minister of Dhananand. Okay, this Amatya Rakshas was the prime minister of Dhananand. Okay, so he was basically this Amatya Rakshas was prime minister of Dhananand, in a way we can say like that. Okay, so similarly, whosoever was the prime minister of this Chhatrapati, that is Maratha king, that was called as Peshwa. Okay, that was called as Peshwa. However, after the appointment of although in that Chandragupta Maurya serial which used to come on the Sony TV, the society which has been shown, the such kind of society was not at all there. Okay, in that serial it is shown that Durdhara, the sister of Dhananand, okay, she falls in love with that Chandragupta Maurya and all those things are shown. Okay, but in reality in those days women did not have any right. Okay, so much rights did not, women did not have so much rights that they can fall in love with someone. Okay, so the Chandragupta Maurya serial has been modernized. Okay, it has been modernized so that the common masses nowadays in modern India can see the serial and enjoy it. So it is a dramatical representation. It is a dramatical representation. In real life, such things were not there in those times. Okay, so you must understand this thing very well. That no princess can ever fall in love with any slave at that time. Okay, no princess was allowed to fall in love with any slave. All these things are shown just for entertainment purpose. Okay, so the most important regional power which and in that serial Chanakya has been shown as a very you can say ethical person. Okay, but if you look at the history, then Chanakya is not so ethical. Okay, he is after defeating after making an umbrella empire under Chandragupta Maurya, what did he do? After making an umbrella empire, he basically did not give any powers to those kings who had actually helped Chandragupta Maurya to establish an all India empire. Okay, so all those kings were killed basically. Okay, so all these things that Chanakya was very ethical, all these things are just rubbish. Okay, there was nothing ethical. All of it was just diplomacy. Okay, all of it was just diplomacy. In that Chandragupta Maurya serial in Sony Live or Sony TV, which you used to see some 2 or 3 years back from today, that serial basically says that Chanakya was very ethical, but in reality, if you study history, ancient history, if you study, then you will realize that the Chanakya was not at all ethical. Okay, there was nothing ethical in that Chanakya Niti. Only thing was, everything was diplomatic. Okay, self-interest was there. Okay. So the most important regional state which emerged after death of Aurangzeb were the Marathas, obviously, and under the able leadership of Peshwas. Okay, Peshwa used to be the prime minister of Maratha king or Chhatrapati. Okay, now Peshwa was the prime minister of Maratha king or Chhatrapati. However, when Balaji Vishwanath was appointed as Peshwa in 1713, what happened in 1713? Balaji Vishwanath was appointed as the Peshwa. So the Peshwaship after that became hereditary. First, what used to happen before? Before Balaji Vishwanath, Peshwa was appointed and it was not hereditary. Okay. Before Balaji Vishwanath, what pattern was there? The Peshwa was appointed by the king, and the Peshwa's son will not be the Peshwa. Okay, unless appointed by the king. Again appointed by the king. Okay, so Peshwaship was not hereditary. But after the appointment of Balaji Vishwanath in 1713, Peshwaship became hereditary. Okay, Peshwaship became hereditary means the son of Peshwa will again become Peshwa. Then his son will again become Peshwa. Okay, so like that. And only sons, remember this thing, only son had the importance at that time. Okay, even today the Indian society is not has not come out of this male dominated society, like the son is still given the son is still given preference over daughter. Okay, son is still given preference over daughter. So in those days daughters did not have any right at all. Okay, those were enclosed in homes. Okay, daughters were enclosed in homes in ancient times also and medieval times also, both. Okay, it is only modern concept that daughter can do everything, daughter is equal to son. This is only a modern day concept. Okay, in ancient days such things were not there, in medieval also not there, in Europe, even in Europe also such things were not there. It was only after industrial revolution in Europe that the concept of daughters getting equal importance as sons, this concept came only after industrial revolution in Europe. Okay, and in India this concept is not yet to be established. Okay, this concept was tried to be established by successive governments after 1947, but still son meta preference is still there. Okay, in Indian society. So but in European society they have come out of this male dominated society almost. Okay, they have equal rights for men and women, like they have the same dress code. Okay, in India the dress code for male is different, the dress code for female is different in India. But in Europe the dress code for men is also the same, and for women also the dress code is same. In India the woman IS officer wears a sari. Okay, in India woman IS officer usually wears a sari or salwar suit. Okay, she does not wear coat and pant. Okay, in India an IS officer, lady IS officer does not wear coat and pant. Okay, but but in UK even a powerful lady wears a coat. Okay, so that is a part of Indian culture, and that is important also. I don't say it is discriminatory. If everyone will wear western attire, if everyone will start wearing western attire, then our culture will be completely destroyed. Okay, so it is necessary also. Okay, and an IS officer wearing a dhoti will look very odd. A male IS officer wearing a dhoti will look very odd. Okay, so it is good, but I am telling you that in some schools of India, the IS officers have full right to wear a salwar suit. Okay, and lady IS officer has full right to wear a salwar suit. But if you look at some of the schools in India, okay, some of the schools have this sari code. Okay, that is you must wear a sari when you are on duty in the college or school. So that is there. Okay, salwar suit is not allowed for ladies in many colleges and schools. So that shows that our society is yet to be completely free from all these things. Okay, yes, I just said it because salwar suit is comparatively more as compared to sari. It is more convenient. Salwar suit is basically more convenient as compared to sari for a lady. So that's why I said so. Okay. So under the able leadership of Peshwas, Peshwa used to be the Prime Minister of Maratha King or Chhatrapati. However, after the appointment of Balaji Vishwanath in 1713, Peshwaship became hereditary. Okay, and real power came into the hand of Peshwas, and the Chhatrapati receded in background. Okay, Chhatrapati went to background, and the de facto rulers became Peshwas. Okay, Peshwas were the de facto rulers. Although in de jure sense, Chhatrapati was the ruler, but in de facto sense, Peshwas became the ruler in 1713 after the appointment of Balaji Vishwanath as the Peshwa. Okay. Marathas. Okay, Marathas. What happened in Marathas? Shivaji declared himself Chhatrapati 1674. Okay, this concept of Chhatrapati, that is the umbrella king. Okay, Chhatrapati, what does it mean by Chhatrapati? Chhatrapati means umbrella king. Okay, literal meaning is like that. So Shivaji 1674. Okay, so in 1674 Shivaji the Great. Okay, you learn about all those things. Okay, so Shivaji king was indeed great, but not in the sense which political parties show him today. Okay, he was a very secular king. Shivaji king was a very secular king. Okay, he was not at all communal, unlike the current ruling regime which tries to show Shivaji Maharaj as a communal person. Okay, anti-Muslim person. It's not like that. Shivaji Maharaj was a very secular king, and that's why he was respected by many historians. Okay, so Shivaji Maharaj declared himself Chhatrapati in 1674, and he ruled from 1674 to 1680. Okay, and he was the real founder of Maratha Empire. Okay, Shivaji Maharaj was real founder of Maratha Empire, and he was an ideal king, almost ideal king. Okay, just like Akbar. Okay, Akbar was also kind of ideal type of king. Akbar was also kind of ideal king. So similarly, Shivaji Maharaj was also kind of ideal king. Okay, so he was the real founder of Maratha Empire. Now he had two sons. Okay, Shivaji Maharaj had two sons. One was Sambhaji, who was the elder son, and Rajaram was the, I think, younger son. Yes, Rajaram was younger son. So Rajaram's wife was Tarabai. Okay, and Rajaram's son was Shivaji second. Okay, why 1 and 2? Because Shivaji name has been repeated after the grandfather. The grandson is also named Shivaji. So that's why historian put the name 1 and 2. This is called Shivaji 1, and this grandson of Shivaji 1 is called as Shivaji 2. Okay, this is Shivaji 1, and the grandson of Shivaji is called as Shivaji 2 because name has been repeated. Okay, but this 1 and 2 tags. Okay, the tags like this tag, for example, 1 tag 1, and this is 2. So such tags are used by historians. Okay, this 2 and this Shivaji 1, such tags are used by historians. Okay, do not ever think that Shivaji Maharaj used to write Shivaji 1 after him, and this grandson of Shivaji Maharaj used to write Shivaji 2 after him. Nothing like that. Okay, all these things have been put by historians for conveniency. Okay, 1 and 2 have been put by historians for conveniency. So Sambhaji was the elder son, Rajaram was the younger son. Rajaram's wife was Tarabai. Okay, and Sambhaji, the elder son, who ruled from 1680 to 1689. Okay, then what happened? During this time Aurangzeb was ruling. Okay, during this time what happened? Aurangzeb was ruling in the Mughal Empire. Okay, and the Mughal Empire was strong also during this time. Okay, the Mughal Empire was not declaring at this time, it was strong enough. Okay, so Sambhaji was the elder son, 1680 to 1689. Then what happened in 1689? In 1689 Aurangzeb tortured and assassinated Sambhaji. Okay, in 1689 Aurangzeb tortured and assassinated Sambhaji. Okay, and it was a blunder on account of Aurangzeb, on part of Aurangzeb. It actually tortured Sambhaji and assassinated him. Okay, and his wife, Shambhaji's wife, okay, was kept as Mughal captives. Okay, now who was the son of Shambhaji? Son of Shambhaji was Shahu Maharaj. Okay, now see over here, son of Shambhaji. After this, son of Shambhaji was Shahu Maharaj. Okay, Shahu son of Shambhaji was Shahu Maharaj. Okay, and Shambhaji's wife means Shahu Maharaj's mother. No need to remember the name. Okay, I'm not telling the name. The mother of Shahu Maharaj and the wife of Shambhaji. Okay, okay, the mother of Shahu Maharaj and wife of Shambhaji and Shahu Maharaj. These two were kept as Mughal captives. Okay, he was kept as Mughal captive, and this lady, that is Shahu Maharaj's mother and Shambhaji's wife, was also kept as Mughal captives, and this person was killed by Aurangzeb. Okay, so it was a blunder on part of Aurangzeb. So son of Shambhaji was Shahu Maharaj. Okay, Shahu and his mother, wife of Shambhaji, okay, were living as captives under Aurangzeb. I already told this to you. As Shambhaji was assassinated, Shahu was also in prison. Okay, and his mother was also in prison. They were getting VIP treatment in prison, although, because prisoners of royal family, used to get royal treatment in the jails, in the prison. Okay, so there was Shahu was in prison and his mother was also in prison after Shambhaji was assassinated. Okay, so Rajaram's wife Tarabai. Okay, so what happened? The brother of Shambhaji, that is Rajaram's wife Tarabai, what did she do? Tarabai basically declared Shivaji II. Tarabai basically declared Shivaji II as the next Chhatrapati. Okay, Tarabai, what did Tarabai do? Tarabai basically declared Shivaji II as the next Chhatrapati Maharaj. Okay, but why was she able to declare Shivaji II as the next Chhatrapati Maharaj? Why was she able to declare Shivaji II as the next Chhatrapati Maharaj? Why? Because all these were in captivity. This person was killed, and this person was in captivity, and this lady was also in captivity. So everyone over here was out of Maratha Empire. Everyone over here was out of Maratha Empire. So Tarabai had got a good opportunity to declare her son Shivaji II as the next emperor of Marathas, that is Chhatrapati. Okay. As Shambhaji was assassinated, Shahu was also in prison, and his mother was also in prison. So Rajaram's wife Tarabai declared Shivaji II as the successor. Tarabai was ruler in de facto sense, as Shivaji II was an infant. Okay, Tarabai was a ruler in de facto sense. Okay, remember this thing. Tarabai was a ruler in de facto sense, not in de jure sense. Okay, Tarabai was a ruler in de facto sense. Okay, and Shivaji II was an infant who was de jure ruler. Okay, this Shivaji II was de jure ruler, means in legal terms. Okay, I have already explained to you all these things in the previous class, that what is meant by de facto, what is meant by de jure, and etc. All those things. Okay, Tarabai was ruler in de facto sense, as Shivaji II was an infant, and Shivaji II was the de jure ruler. Bahadur Shah I. What did Bahadur Shah I do? Now who is Bahadur Shah first? I already told you the very first later Mughal king was Bahadur Shah first. Okay, so Bahadur Shah first's father was Aurangzeb. Okay, so Aurangzeb's son was Bahadur Shah first. So what did Bahadur Shah first do? He released Shahu and his mother from the captivity. Bahadur Shah first, what did he do? He released Shahu and his mother from captivity. Okay, see, Shahu, over here it is Shahu, and his mother, okay, they were made captives by Aurangzeb. But when Aurangzeb died, after that Bahadur Shah first came to the power in as a Mughal emperor. After Aurangzeb's death, Bahadur Shah first became the Mughal emperor. So what did Bahadur Shah first do? He released her. Released her. Bahadur Shah first released her and released Shahu Maharaj also from the Mughal captivity. Okay. Bahadur Shah first released Shahu and his mother from captivity. Okay. Bahadur Shah first released Shahu and his mother from captivity. Clever motive of Bahadur Shah first. What was the motive of Bahadur Shah first? Okay. If you haven't watched the previous classes, then you won't understand this class at all. If you haven't learned history at all these days. Okay. If you are absolute beginner in history, then you should learn from the first lecture. Okay. So clever motive of Bahadur Shah first. He expected. What did he expect? He expected that a civil war will break out between Marathas and Shahu. Okay. Because Shahu was the son of martyr and Tarabai was already established. See, Aurangzeb had made this person and this person as his captives. Bahadur Shah first released her also and released this person also. Okay. Now, already Tarabai had established Shivaji II. Tarabai had already established Shivaji II as the next Chhatrapati king. Okay. And now Tarabai was already ruling, and Shahu Maharaj, who was the son of a martyr. Okay, Shambhaji was a martyr for Marathas. Okay, Shambhaji was like a martyr for Marathas, and this Shahu Maharaj was the son of martyr. Okay, so what happened is that this Shahu Maharaj and Tarabai came at loggerheads. What does it mean by came at loggerheads? मीन्स दुश्मनी आ गई उनके बीच में. ओके, उनके बीच में दुश्मनी आ गई कुर्सी को लेकर. ओके, दैट मीन्स फॉर पावर they got involved in struggle for power, because Shahu Maharaj was the son of Shambhaji and Shambhaji was a martyr for Marathas. So Shahu Maharaj wanted to now become the king, as he thought that Shahu Maharaj thought that it is his legitimate right to rule over Marathas because he is the son of a martyr. But Tarabai was already established, declaring Shivaji II as the successor. Okay, so obviously civil war broke out in Maratha Empire. Okay, in Maratha Empire civil war broke out after this. Okay, and this was the clever motive of Bahadur Shah first, the Mughal emperor. Okay, because Bahadur Shah did not want that Marathas should become powerful. Okay, Bahadur Shah first was very worried that the Mughal empire has already become weak, and if Marathas become powerful, then Mughal empire will start disintegrating. So that's why Bahadur Shah first played a trick. He released them from prison. He released this person and this person from prison. This person and this person. He released them from prison. And that's why a civil war broke out in Maratha Empire, weakening the Maratha Empire. Okay, so that was the clever motive of Bahadur Shah first. So clever motive of Bahadur Shah first was he expected that a civil war will break out between Marathas because Shahu was the son of a martyr and Tarabai was already established. Okay, so he as expected, this happened also. Okay. So this happened also. Bahadur Shah first expectation that civil war will break out amongst Marathas proved to be correct and civil war happened. Okay. Civil war was finally won by Shahu. Okay. So Shahu won the civil war. This person Shahu defeated Tarabai. Okay. Tarabai was defeated by Shahu Maharaj. So Shahu Maharaj emerged victorious. Okay. Civil war was won by Shahu. Main reason behind the victory of Shahu was the support of Balaji Vishwanath. Okay. Now who was the actual reason behind the victory of Shahu Maharaj? Shahu Maharaj won because of Balaji Vishwanath named Peshwa. Okay, because of the Peshwa called as Balaji Vishwanath, Shahu was able to win. Okay, so Shahu Maharaj Shahu Maharaj won because of the support of a powerful Peshwa who later became the Peshwa. At that time he was a powerful noble only. Okay, so with the help of powerful noble Balaji Vishwanath, Shahu Maharaj got victory. In 1713 Balaji Vishwanath was made Peshwa by Shahu. Okay, in 1713 Balaji Vishwanath was made Peshwa by Shahu Maharaj. Okay, after Balaji Vishwanath the Peshwaship became hereditary. After all Balaji Vishwanath, the Peshwaship became hereditary. Okay, this is the thing. During the time of Peshwa Balaji Bajirao, okay, 1740 to 1761, Marathas directly or indirectly control large parts of Indian subcontinent. We will learn who is this Balaji Bajirao Peshwa. Okay, we will learn about this. So during the time of Peshwa Balaji Bajirao from 1740 to 1761, okay, so he is related by blood. Okay, this Peshwa Balaji Bajirao is the successor of this Balaji Vishwanath. Okay, so during the time of Peshwa Balaji Bajirao, who ruled from, and he was the Peshwa Balaji Bajirao was basically de facto ruler, not de jure ruler. Okay, Balaji Bajirao was de facto ruler. As already told to you that Peshwa were the de facto ruler, not de jure ruler. De jure ruler was the Chhatrapati. Okay, so during the time of Peshwa Balaji Bajirao 1740 to 61, Marathas directly or indirectly controlled large parts of Indian subcontinent. Okay, like Gujarat, Malwa, Rajputana, Karnataka, Odisha, Punjab and Kashmir. Okay, so Marathas directly or indirectly control large parts of Indian subcontinent like Gujarat, Malwa, Rajputana, Karnataka, Odisha, Punjab, Kashmir. Okay, large parts of Indian subcontinent means over here. I had shown it to you. Okay, let me show it to you. See over here, Marathas control large parts. Okay, see over here, this whole area. Okay, this whole area was of Maratha. This area is not of Marathas. Northeast was not of Marathas. This whole area came under Bengal. Okay, this particular area came under Bengal, but this complete area. Okay, this complete area was of Marathas. Okay, so Gujarat also large areas. Okay, this is northern Sarkars. Okay, this particular area is basically your northern Sarkars. Let me show it to you properly. Okay, this area is of northern Sarkars. Let me show you. Yeah. Okay, so this particular area was of northern Sarkars. The rest of the areas you know. Okay, already know that this area was of Sikhs, this area was of Rajputs, this of Jats. Okay, Delhi was around Delhi, some small area was under the Mughal Empire. Okay, some Delhi to Palam area. Okay, like that, means very small area. Okay, so Rohilkhand was there, Awadh was there. Okay, this Nizam was there, Mysore was there, Travancore was there, Carnatic was there. This is India in the 1750s. Okay, just a second, friends. Yes, During the time of Peshwa Balaji Bajirao, 1740 to 61, Marathas directly or indirectly controlled large parts of Indian subcontinent like Gujarat, Malwa, Rajputana, Karnataka, Odisha, Punjab and Kashmir. Okay, directly or indirectly they controlled. Okay, in spite of the fact that Marathas had many brilliant administrators and generals. Okay, despite the fact that Marathas had many brilliant administrators and generals, still they lacked the vision. Okay, they lacked the vision also, diplomacy also, and unity also. Unity was not at all there amongst Marathas. Okay, they used to fight with each other. So they lacked the vision, diplomacy, and unity which was necessary for establishing an all India empire. Okay, so we will learn about this. This is a main question, that why Marathas could not establish an all India empire. This is a main question. Okay, so we will discuss that also. Okay, so in spite of the fact that Marathas had many brilliant administrators and generals, they lacked the vision, diplomacy and unity which was necessary for establishing an all India empire. Okay, as Marathas controlled large parts of Indian subcontinent at that time, that's why the third battle of Panipat occurred. Okay, as Marathas controlled large parts of Indian subcontinent. Okay, I already told to you that how much big area they covered at that time. That's why third battle of Panipat occurred. Now what is this third battle of Panipat? It happened in 1761 because of invasion from northwest. Okay, you know this very well that invasions in India occurred from the northwest direction. Okay, you must be knowing this thing. Let me show it to you, that most of the invasions in India, okay, most of the invasions in India occurred from the northeast area, from this particular area. Most of the invasions in India occurred from this area, northwest area. Okay. So most of the invasions in India occurred from the northwest. Now as Marathas controlled a very huge area, okay, Marathas as they controlled a very huge area like this, okay, or like this complete area, almost entire Indian subcontinent except a few parts. Okay, not almost but yes, near to almost. Okay, so from northwest, when Ahmad Shah Abdali invaded, so they fought at Panipat. Panipat is a place near Delhi in present day Haryana. Okay, so third battle of Panipat occurred because Marathas controlled huge parts of Indian subcontinent. That's why third battle of Panipat occurred between Ahmad Shah Abdali and Marathas. Okay, yes, third battle of Panipat. Okay, third battle of Panipat, 1761. Afghans versus Marathas. From the side of Afghans, Ahmad Shah Abdali or Ahmad Shah Durrani fought from the side of Afghans who invaded from the northwest. Okay, Ahmad Shah Abdali or Ahmad Shah Durrani invaded from the northwest. Okay, and he was the Ahmad Shah Abdali is also the founder of modern Afghanistan. Modern political boundaries of Afghanistan, whatever you see, those have been established by Ahmad Shah Abdali. Okay, so modern day political boundaries of Afghanistan have been established by Ahmad Shah Abdali or Ahmad Shah Durrani. Okay, so in the third battle of Panipat, which was fought in 1761, Afghans fought with Marathas. Okay, and amongst Marathas there were leaders. Some leaders were there amongst Marathas. The leaders were Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao. Okay, those were the leaders on ground. They belong to Peshwa family. Okay, Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao belong to the Peshwa family. Okay, and Marathas, these were the Maratha leaders, Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao. And Vishwas Rao is the son of Peshwa Balaji Baji Rao. Okay, we will later on we will learn the family tree of the Peshwas. Okay, we will learn about the family tree of the Peshwas, but later on. Okay, so from the sides of Marathas, from the Peshwa family, Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao fought the third battle of Panipat, and Vishwas Rao was the son of Peshwa Balaji Baji Rao. Okay, and Afghans were the army of Afghans was led by Ahmad Shah Abdali or Ahmad Shah Durrani. Okay, so this was third battle of Panipat, which was fought in 1761. This date you must remember. This 1761 date, it is worth remembering. You must remember this 1761. Okay. Ahmad Shah Abdali won the third battle of Panipat. Okay. After 1749, then this third battle of Panipat was a big setback. Okay. This third battle of Panipat was a big setback for Marathas. Okay. It broke the backbone of Marathas. Third battle of Panipat broke the backbone of Marathas. Okay. So it decided that Marathas did not establish an all India empire. What did the third battle of Panipat do? Third battle of Panipat basically made it clear that Marathas will not establish an all India empire. It made it clear. Okay. After 1749, when Chhatrapati Shahu died, Chhatrapati resided in background. Okay, you know this very well. Okay, Balaji Vishwanath became the main power. Okay, in 1749, after Chhatrapati Shahu died, his successors were incapable. The successors of Chhatrapati Shahu were incapable. So Chhatrapati resided in background after that. Okay, as Marathas had captured Punjab and Kashmir, that's why third battle of Panipat took place. Okay, you know, I told it to you. Large parts. Okay, Punjab and Kashmir. You know where is Punjab? Okay, let me show it to you in a small map. Okay. This area is Punjab and Kashmir, right? This area. So this area, as it is Punjab and Kashmir, and it was captured by Marathas. So northwest frontiers, from northwest province, when Ahmad Shah Abdali was invaded, so obviously Marathas will fight with them. Okay, because Punjab and Kashmir is under Marathas. So that's why third battle of Panipat took place. Okay. Why Afghans fought the third battle of Panipat with Marathas? Let us see. During Ahmad Shah Bahadur's rule, you know this very well that when Ahmad Shah Abdali had invaded India, the Mughal emperor was Ahmad Shah Bahadur. You must be knowing this. Okay, I already told to you while discussing the later Mughal kings that when Ahmad Shah Bahadur invaded India, Ahmad Shah Abdali invaded India. When Ahmad Shah Abdali invaded India, Ahmad Shah Bahadur was the Mughal emperor. I already told this to you. Okay. So during Ahmad Shah Bahadur's rule, Ahmad Shah Abdali or Ahmad Shah Durrani invaded India many times between 1748 to 1767. Okay. Ahmad Shah Abdali considered Punjab, okay, Indian Punjab plus Pakistani Punjab of today. Okay. What did Ahmad Shah Abdali do? Ahmad Shah Abdali considered, okay, now why this war happened, I am telling you in detail. Why this war happened, the third battle of Panipat, why did it happen? I am telling you in detail. Okay. So Ahmad Shah Abdali considered Punjab region. Which region? Punjab region, this particular region. Okay. Was considered by Ahmad Shah Abdali, that is the Indian Punjab plus Pakistani Punjab of today. Pakistani side of Punjab is even bigger than Indian Punjab. You must know this. Okay. Pakistani side of Punjab is even bigger than the Indian side of Punjab. Okay. So Ahmad Shah Abdali considered Punjab to be a part of his empire. Okay. And Marathas also considered it to be a part of their empire. Okay, so war was bound to happen, that's why. Because Marathas also considered Punjab as a part of their territory, and Ahmad Shah Abdali also considered Punjab as a part of his territory. So war was bound to happen. Ahmad Shah Abdali had appointed his minor son as the Viceroy of Punjab and Multan. And Multan is in today's Pakistan. Okay. So Ahmad Shah Abdali had appointed minor son Taimur. The name of his minor son was Taimur. So Ahmad Shah Abdali had appointed his minor son Taimur as the Viceroy of Punjab and Multan in today's Pakistan at Lahore. Okay. Lahore is also in today's Pakistan. Okay. Nadir Shah had already captured territories. Okay. Nadir Shah, what did Nadir Shah do? Nadir Shah had already captured territories which were to the west of Indus. I already told this to you. Okay. See over here. See. To the west of Indus river means this particular region. Okay. This particular region was already captured by Nadir Shah, who was the Persian emperor. Okay. This particular area was lost by Mughals. Okay. After Nadir Shah was from here. Nadir Shah was from Iran, and this Ahmad Shah Durrani was from Afghanistan. Okay. So this particular area, this shaded area, was lost by Mughals. I already told you in the previous classes. Just a second, friends, just a second. Okay, Nadir Shah had already captured territories which were to the west of Indus. Peacock Throne, Kohinoor, Darya-i-Noor, etc. were taken away. Okay, so Nadir Shah had already captured the territories which were to the west of Indus. Now the territories to the east of Indus remained. Okay, okay, so if this is India, right over here, okay, this is over here, there is Indus river. Okay, so this particular area was already captured by the Persian emperor Nadir Shah. Now this particular area had remained with Mughals. Okay, so Ahmad Shah Durrani, who was from here, okay, he tried to take over this area. Okay, this particular area. So the territories to the east of Indus, okay, already this is north, south, east and west. So territories to the west of Indus have already been lost. Now territories to the east of Indus means this area, west of Indus means this area. So the territories to the east of Indus are also being targeted now. Okay. Nadir Shah had already captured territories which were to the west of Indus. Peacock Throne, Kohinoor, Darya-i-Noor, etc. were taken away. Okay. Lahore was an important city in Punjab. You must be knowing this. Okay. Ahmad Shah appointed his minor son Taimur Shah as the Viceroy of Punjab. Okay. His name was Taimur Shah. Marathas fought Battle of Lahore in 1759. Okay. In 1759 means 2 years before Third Battle of Panipat. 2 years before Third Battle of Panipat in 1759, Marathas fought Lahore, Battle of Lahore, and expelled Taimur Shah, the minor son of Ahmad Shah Abdali. What did Marathas do? Marathas expelled Taimur Shah, the minor son of Ahmad Shah Abdali. So Marathas expelled him. Okay. By fighting the Battle of Lahore in 1759. they expelled Taimur Shah, the minor son of Ahmad Shah Abdali. Taimur Shah became upset and went to Ahmad Shah Abdali. Okay, Taimur Shah had fled. He fled Punjab. Okay, Taimur Shah fled Punjab and went to Ahmad Shah Abdali. Okay, so political ambitions of Marathas had increased. Okay, political ambitions of Marathas had increased tremendously during this time. Okay, Marathas had also started controlling Delhi and Kashmir Punjab region. Okay, Marathas had also started controlling Delhi and Kashmir Punjab region. Marathas claiming Punjab to be a part of their territory. Okay, Marathas claiming Punjab to be a part of their influence or territory became the main reason behind the third battle of Panipat. Okay, this was because Ahmad Shah Abdali or Durrani considered Punjab to be under his control. Okay, Ahmad Shah Abdali or Durrani considered Punjab to be under his control. Okay, so Ahmad Shah Abdali decided to fight Marathas. I already told this to you. Okay, and Ahmad Shah Abdali also wanted to take the revenge of Taimur Shah being expelled. Okay, Taimur Shah was his son who was expelled. So Ahmad Shah Abdali also wanted to take the revenge of Taimur Shah being expelled. Okay, so Ahmad Shah Abdali decided to fight Marathas. Taimur Shah was viceroy. Okay, Taimur Shah was basically your viceroy. Viceroy means representative of the king. Ahmad Shah Abdali had appointed his minor son as his representative. Okay, Sadashiv Rao Bhau, Vishwas Rao were the Maratha leaders. Sadashiv Rao Bhau, okay, Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao. Both of them were directly or indirectly related to the Peshwa family. Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao were both related to the Peshwa family. Okay, they were relatives of the Peshwa family. So Sadashiv Rao Bhau and Vishwas Rao were the Maratha leaders on ground during the third battle of Panipat. Balaji Bajirao was the Peshwa. Balaji Bajirao was the Peshwa. Vishwas Rao was his son. Okay, Balaji Bajirao was the Peshwa and Vishwas Rao was his son. Sadashiv Rao also belonged to the extended family of Balaji Bajirao. Okay, Balaji Bajirao was Peshwa and Vishwas Rao was the son of Peshwa Balaji Bajirao, and Sadashiv Rao Bhau also belonged to the extended family of Balaji Bajirao. Okay, I already told this to you. But remember this thing that Vishwas Rao was the son of Balaji Bajirao. Although you no need to remember that who was related to whom with which relation. Okay, you need not remember the blood relations. Remember this thing that in history no need to remember the blood relations. Okay, no need to remember the blood relations in history. Okay, so Balaji Bajirao was the Peshwa. Vishwas Rao was his son. Sadashiv Rao also belonged to the extended family of Balaji Bajirao. Famous quote related to third battle of Panipat. Okay, it did not decide who will rule India, but it decided that who will not rule India. Okay, famous quote related to third battle of Panipat is that it did not decide who will rule India, but it decided who will not rule India. Okay, so it did not decide that Ahmad Shah Abdali will rule India. Okay, Ahmad Shah Abdali could not rule India, but surely Marathas will not rule India. This was decided. Okay, surely it was decided that Marathas will not rule India. Okay, though it was not decided that it did not decide that Ahmad Shah Abdali will rule India, but it decided that Marathas will not rule India. Okay. So it decided that it did not decide that who will not rule India. It did not decide that who will rule India, but it decided that who will not rule India. Okay, उसने ये डिसाइड किया कि भारत पे कौन राज नहीं करेगा. सॉरी, उसने ये डिसाइड नहीं किया कि भारत पे कौन राज करेगा, उसने ये ज़रूर डिसाइड किया कि भारत पे कौन राज नहीं करेगा। ओके, सो उसने ये डिसाइड तो नहीं किया कि अहमद शाह अब्दाली भारत पे राज करेगा, ये तो डिसाइड नहीं हुआ। ओके, लेकिन मराठास भारत पे राज नहीं करेंगे ये ज़रूर डिसाइड हो गया। ओके, after this battle it became clear that Marathas cannot rule entire India because it broke the this third battle of Panipat broke the backbone of Marathas. Okay, third battle of Panipat was a big setback for Marathas. The state of Bengal. Murshid Quli Khan is considered as the de facto founder of the independent state of Bengal. Okay, now we will learn about the state of Bengal. Just a second friends, we will learn about state of Bengal just after some time. Okay, so let's move on towards our state of Bengal. Okay, we have already learned Marathas. Okay, although we are going to discuss Marathas in further detail later on, but for now this much is sufficient. Okay, but later on we will discuss Marathas in detail. Okay, so now let's look at the state of Bengal. The state of Bengal was there. Where was Bengal? I have already told to you. You can see in the figure where did the Bengal lie. This particular region was Bengal actually. Okay, this particular region was completely Bengal. Okay, so it was a huge area. It consisted of actually Bengal was such a big area that it consisted of Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Bangladesh, some parts of Assam and Jharkhand also. Okay, such big was the area of Bengal. Okay, so let us write over here. Okay, let me write what was Bengal at that time. Okay, Bengal of that time is equal to today's West Bengal plus Bangladesh plus Odisha, today's West Bengal plus Bangladesh plus Odisha plus Jharkhand plus Bihar okay plus nothing and some parts of Assam also, some parts of Assam, not entire Assam but some parts of Assam. Okay, so this much was the area of Bengal at that time. State of Bengal. Murshid Quli Khan is considered to be the de facto founder of the independent state of Bengal. De facto founder means he freed himself from the grip of Mughal emperor. Okay, Murshid Quli Khan, what did he do? He freed himself from the grip of Mughal emperor. Okay, in 1713 he was appointed as governor of Bengal. Okay, and in 1717 Odisha was also added to his charge. Okay, today's Odisha was added to his charge in 1717, and in 1713 he was appointed as governor of Bengal by the Mughal emperor. Okay, although means 1707 already Aurangzeb had died, so he had been appointed by later Mughal king. Okay, later Mughal king. So in 1713 he was appointed as governor of Bengal, and in 1717 Odisha was added to his charge. he introduced the system of Ijra or Ijara. Okay, both are same. Either you call it Ijra or Ijara. So he introduced the system of Ijra or giving the right to collect land revenue on contract. Okay, I already discussed this Ijra system with you in the previous classes. So I don't think there is further need to discuss this Ijra system. Okay. Later this Ijra system is transformed into Zamindari system in Bengal. Okay. So Ijra system, in the Ijra system the land belongs to the ruler only. Okay, in the Ijra system the land belongs to the ruler only, the one who is ruling Bengal. To that person only the land will belong in Ijra system. But in Zamindari system, suppose Murshid Quli Khan has introduced the Ijra system. Okay, so whosoever will be the owner, means the leader of the particular pasture, particular agricultural land, whosoever will be the leader, that person will not hold any land. The land will be of Murshid Quli Khan only, but that person will only collect the revenue on contract, that is Ijra. But after the Ijra is transformed into Zamindari system, it is feudal tendency basically. Okay, when Ijra transformed into Zamindari system, that means that the local Ijaredar has become so far powerful that he is in de facto sense he is behaving as if it's the agricultural land is his own land. Okay, like that. So this Ijra system transformed into Zamindari system, that means that the Ijaredar became very powerful later on. Okay, later, not at the time of Murshid Quli Khan. Okay. State of Bengal also in de jure sense considered Mughals as their sovereign. Okay, in de jure sense means in legal terms. In legal terms, Mughals were considered as the sovereign, but in practical matters, means in de facto sense, the state of Bengal was independent. In practical matters, means in de facto sense. Okay. Ijra means giving the right to collect land revenue on contract, that is revenue farming. I have already discussed this in the previous classes. Ijra system. Okay, you call it Ijra or Ijara. Later Mughal king Jahandar Shah. Okay, like later Mughal king Jahandar Shah had also started Ijra system. While discussing Jahandar Shah in the previous classes, in the previous two classes I have already explained Jahandar Shah. Okay, so in that Jahandar Shah video, that is later Mughal king's video, you might find the definition of Ijra over there. Okay, so that's why I am not explaining this while discussing Bengal. I have already discussed. Okay, so later Mughal king Jahandar Shah had also started Ijra system. You must learn this, that Jahandar Shah had also started the same system. Murshid Quli Khan is considered the founder of Zamindari system of Bengal. Okay, so note this thing, that when he started the Ijra system, it transformed into Zamindari system after some time. Okay, Murshid Quli Khan is considered the founder of Zamindari system of Bengal, means Ijaredari converted to Zamindari during the reign of Murshid Quli Khan only. Okay, Murshid Quli Khan died in 1727. Okay, Murshid Quli Khan, what happened to Murshid Quli Khan? He died in 1727. At that time the life expectancy was around 30 years only. Okay, during those times the life expectancy of India was not so high. It was around 30 years only, in the line of 30 years. Okay, today it is in the line of 60 years. Okay, so life expectancy has doubled today, but at that time it was around 30 years only. Okay, so Murshid Quli Khan died in 1727 and was succeeded by his son-in-law Shujauddin. Okay, when Murshid Quli Khan died in 1727, he was succeeded by his damad, that is son-in-law. Okay, daughter's husband, Shujauddin. Okay, in 1733 the governorship of Bihar was added to the charge by Mughal governor Muhammad Shah. Okay, so Muhammad Shah basically gave the governorship of Bihar in 1732 to Shujauddin. Okay, Shujauddin was given the governorship of Bihar in 1733 by the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. Okay, then Shujauddin also died in 1739 and he was succeeded by his son Sarfaraz Khan. Okay, so you need not remember so much. Okay, and who was related to whom with what blood relation, that is not important at all. Okay, UPSC does not ask such question that who was whose son-in-law, who was whose daughter-in-law, and all those rubbish stuff UPSC never asks in history. Okay, those things are asked in seaside blood relations. In history such things are not asked. Okay, such cramming things are not asked in UPSC examination. So no need to cram all this that Shujauddin was the son-in-law of Murshid Quli Khan and all those things. All these things just in order to make a story I have written. Okay, you must just remember that after Murshid Quli Khan, the next ruler was Shujauddin. Thereafter Shujauddin, the next ruler was Alivardi Khan. Like that you have to after Shujauddin, Sarfaraz Khan. Okay, and after Sarfaraz Khan, Alivardi Khan came. You must understand this. Okay, no need to remember that he was Sajja's son-in-law and he was his son and all those things. No need to remember. Okay, Murshid Quli Khan died in 1727, was succeeded by his son-in-law Damad Shujauddin, and the governorship of Bihar was added to the charge of Shujauddin by Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. Shujauddin died in 1739. Okay, and he was succeeded by his son Sarfaraz Khan. Okay, so after Shujauddin, Sarfaraz Khan came. Alivardi Khan, who was the deputy governor of Bihar. Okay, Alivardi Khan was the deputy governor of Bihar, rebelled against Sarfaraz Khan. Okay, against Sarfaraz Khan, Alivardi Khan rebelled. He was the deputy governor of Bihar. Alivardi Khan was the deputy governor of Bihar. Okay, so he rebelled against Sarfaraz Khan and killed him in 1740. Okay, so Sarfaraz Khan was killed by Alivardi Khan in 1740. You need not remember that Alivardi Khan killed Sarfaraz Khan in 1740. No need to remember this thing. Okay, such rubbish questions are asked in police constable examination. Okay, or in state PCS. UPSC does not ask such questions. Okay, UPSC asks logical question. Okay, not illogical, means cramming type questions, crude facts, factual, such things are not asked usually. Okay, logical things are asked. Factual things are asked, but in science and tech and all those subjects, crude factual questions might also be asked in science and tech and all those things. But in history, never crude factual questions are never asked. Okay. In current affairs also some crude factual questions might be asked to you. But in this history, never crude factual questions will never be asked to you in UPSC. Okay. Or even if asked, they will be very rare. Okay, and the cutoff is never 200 out of 200. You must remember this thing. So Alivardi Khan, who was the deputy governor of Bihar, rebelled against him and killed Sarfaraz Khan in 1740. Alivardi Khan bribed the Mughal emperor to gain legitimacy. Okay, what did Alivardi Khan do? After Alivardi Khan killed Sarfaraz Khan, so Mughal emperor will be very angry now. Mughal emperor will be very angry. So what did Alivardi Khan do? He bribed the Mughal emperor. घूस दे दिया उसको. ठीक है. So Alivardi Khan bribed the Mughal emperor to gain legitimacy. Okay. He managed to gain not only legitimacy but was able to gain the governorship of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Means the governorship of Bengal, Bihar, Odisha means whatever Sarfaraz Khan had, all things went to Alivardi Khan. Okay, Mughal emperor gave him legitimacy after taking bribe. Okay, Alivardi Khan was an able administrator. Okay, he was a very capable person. Okay, he was not like loser type person. The Mughal dynasty which was at that time after 1707, the kind of Mughal dynasty we got to see, such type of people were not there. He was not like that, licentious and luxury loving and like that. He was not like that. Okay, he was a serious administrator. He was a capable person. Okay, Okay, so Alivardi Khan was an able administrator and Bengal prospered under him. Okay, and Bengal prospered under him means Bengal became very rich under the able leadership of Alivardi Khan. Okay, he also knew the art of tackling European companies. Alivardi Khan also knew the art of tackling European companies. Alivardi Khan tackled European companies in a very good manner. Okay, he believed that these European companies must be kept in check. Okay, so farmans and all those things should not be granted blindly to them. He believed like that. Okay, so Alivardi Khan knew the art of tackling European companies. Now Bengal at that time, already told to you, Bengal plus Bangladesh plus Odisha plus Bihar plus some part of Assam plus Jharkhand. Such big was the area of Bengal. Okay, ruler at that time was considered the owner of the land, but he gave some rights to the zamindar. Okay, at that time ruler was considered the owner of the land, but he gave some rights to the zamindar. Means ijaredari is something else and zamindari is something else. Okay, a little bit slight difference is there between ijaredari and zamindari. Okay, in zamindari there are some more rights. Okay, as compared to ijaredar, zamindar has some little bit more rights. Okay, as compared to ijaredar. So ruler at that time was considered as the owner of the land, but he gave some rights to the zamindar. Alivardi Khan became Nawab in 1740. Okay, already there must be written. Okay, so see, in 1740 Alivardi Khan became the Nawab. He was a capable man and ruled till 1756. Okay, Alivardi Khan ruled till 1756. Okay, and 1757 Battle of Plassey took place. Okay, 1757 what happened? Battle of Plassey took place. But Alivardi Khan ruled till 1756. Means after Alivardi Khan his successors were not at all good. After Alivardi Khan his successors were not capable. This is the meaning of that. Because after Alivardi Khan's rule had gone out of Bengal in 1756, when Alivardi Khan died or he stopped ruling Bengal in 1756, from that time onwards the successors were not so capable. So that's why Battle of Plassey, within 1 year Battle of Plassey took place, 1757. The name of Mughal governor was very big. Okay, in order to give legitimacy to the rule, so that nobles and other people do not revolt against the king, that's why needed the name of. So why in de jure sense they were still taking the name of Mughal emperor and considered Mughal emperor as their sovereign. Okay, even after being de facto independent rulers, they still in de jure sense considered the Mughal emperor as their sovereign. But why? Okay, because the name of Mughal emperor was very big. Okay, the name of Mughal emperor was very big, and in order to give legitimacy to the rule, okay, so that the nobles and other people do not revolt against the king. Okay, so the rule must be legitimized. Okay, otherwise people will revolt or nobles will revolt. Okay, at that time the common masses did not revolt, because common masses common masses also, because common masses liked the Mughal emperor very much. Okay, the Mughal emperor's image was very good in the minds of the common man also, in the minds of the masses also. Okay, so in order to give legitimacy to the rule, so that nobles and other people do not revolt against the king, okay, that's why they needed the name of Mughal emperor. Okay, so they were showing off that we are ruling under the Mughal emperor, we are still sovereign to the Mughal emperor. They were showing all those things. They were doing showbazi. Okay, just they were showing off, but in actuality in actual terms they were ruling independently. Okay, so that's why they needed the name of Mughal emperor, so that their rule is legitimized and people do not revolt, common masses do not revolt, and also the nobles support. Okay, also that the nobles will give the support only if they consider the Mughal emperor as their sovereign. Only then the noble will give them the support. Otherwise nobles will say that you are considering yourself independent in de jure sense also. Okay, so I won't support you, like that. Okay, but if the noble is told that no, 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 see, I am ruling on behalf of Mughal emperor only. Okay, so in that case, the rule is legitimized and the noble does not revolt. Alivardi Khan died in 1756. Okay, and was succeeded by Siraj-ud-Dawla. Okay, after Alivardi Khan died in 1756, he was succeeded by Siraj-ud-Dawla, who was 23 years old, only 23 years old, when he became the Nawab of Bengal. Okay, so Alivardi Khan died in 1756, means Siraj-ud-Dawla was of your age. Okay, your age, was succeeded by Siraj-ud-Dawla, who was 23 years old, means your age, when he became the Nawab of Bengal. Okay. Alivardi Khan believed that European companies needed to be tackled in a very, very smart manner. I already told to you that Alivardi Khan was an expert in tackling the European companies. Siraj-ud-Dawla, who was the successor of Alivardi Khan, did not know the art of tackling European companies. Okay, Siraj-ud-Dawla did not know the art of tackling European companies, unlike his precedor Alivardi Khan. Okay, that's why Siraj-ud-Dawla suffered. Siraj-ud-Dawla would be discussed while learning about the Battle of Plassey. When we will discuss the Battle of Plassey, then we will learn about Siraj-ud-Dawla. Okay, but for now, just stop over here. Okay, as far as Bengal is concerned. Okay, so Siraj-ud-Dawla would be discussed while discussing the Battle of Plassey. Siraj-ud-Dawla was not so good at tackling the European companies. Okay, and he was very young when he took the throne. When he became the Nawab, he was very young. Okay. Introduction of 18th century India. In 18th century India, it is largely seen that there is not a single big power. There is not a single big power in the 18th century India. Okay. Everything is distributed. There are only regional powers. There is not a single centralized power in Delhi, and it's not like that. That pan-India empire is not there. Pan-India empire is not there at that time. Okay. In 18th century India, it is largely seen that there is not a single big power. After the death of Aurangzeb, the Mughal empire started decline. So after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, the Mughal empire started declining. There were foreign invasions too. Okay, foreign invasions were happening from the northwest. Okay, foreign invasions were happening from the northwest, means today's Pakistan, Afghanistan side, northwest side. Okay, there were many regional powers. European companies also started interfering in Indian matters. Okay, many regional powers were there. So European companies also took the benefit of all this situation which was going out of hand. Okay, law and order situation was not in control. So European companies also started interfering in Indian matters to take an advantage, to get an edge over their rule. Okay, so that they can trade freely. So they started interfering in Indian matters. Okay. Foreign invasions mean examples of foreign invasion: invasion of Nadir Shah, invasion of Ahmad Shah Abdali. Okay, or Ahmad Shah Durrani. Ahmad Shah Abdali and Ahmad Shah Durrani both are same. Okay, and invasion of Nadir Shah. Those are foreign invasions example which we have already discussed in the previous classes. Okay. There were many regional powers. European companies also started interfering in Indian matters. Okay, what did European companies do? They also started interfering in Indian matters. Okay, polity of 18th century India in the first half. What does it mean by first half? Means 1700 to 1750. What does it mean? In the first half of the 18th century means 1700 to 1750. This is what is meant by the roughly, okay, not exactly, roughly 1700 to 1750. So polity, 18th century India in the first half. In North India, what was happening in North India? A triangular power struggle was going on between Mughals, Marathas and Afghans in the North India. Okay, Triangular power struggle was going on between Mughals, Marathas and Afghans in North India. And these Marathas were in the Deccan region. Okay, so Marathas will also be powerful in the South India too, because Marathas, the area of Marathas connects North India and South India. So Marathas were active in both North and South, but Mughals and Afghans were active in North only, mostly. Okay, and Marathas were active in both North and South. So in North India, a triangular power struggle was going on between Mughals, Marathas and Afghans. Afghans were also very powerful in North India, already told to you. There were Maratha and Afghan raids in northern, central and eastern India. Okay, there were Maratha and Afghan raids. Marathas and Afghans used to raid. Okay, you must know this thing, that Marathas did not have any sound economic policy. You must understand this. Okay, at that time the regional powers, what they used to do, they used to plunder the territories of the enemy. Okay, plundering the territories of the enemy. What does it mean by plunder? Plunder means looting the territory of the enemies. Okay, and destroying the economic structure of the enemy, and plundering the areas of the enemy means लूटपाट. ओके, लूटपाट करते थे, अपने दुश्मन के क्षेत्र में घुस के लूटपाट करते थे. ओके, and that's how they earned the money. And that's how they expand their royal treasury. That was a very good, plundering was a very good source of restoring the royal treasury at that time. Okay, so there were Maratha and Afghan raids in northern, central and eastern India, more in number but in lesser number in other parts of India also. Okay, so in northern, central and eastern India means which area? You must understand this thing, that northern, central and eastern India means this part, this particular part. Okay, let me show it to you. Northern, central and eastern India, let me show it to you with a different color. Okay, this is East India. Okay, then this is North India. Okay, this is Central India. Okay, this much area. Okay, so in these areas, in this particular area, there were Afghan and Maratha raids, more in number but lesser number in other parts, also in lesser number. Okay, in other parts also in lesser number, but over here in more number. That's what is the meaning. There were Maratha and Afghan raids in northern, central and eastern India, more in number but in lesser number in other parts of India also. Marathas and Afghans did not have any sound economic policy. Okay, they did not have any sound economic policy. Their only source of income was plundering. Okay, so they were dependent upon the collection of taxes. So they usually used to threaten their neighbors and enemies to pay taxes. They used to threaten their neighbors and enemies, okay, to pay taxes. Okay, so they used to threaten their enemies to pay taxes. Okay, you must be aware about the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi and all those things. Okay, in first half of the 18th century, Marathas and Afghan raids were common. Okay, this was also a reason why the time it was very easy to colonize India when Britishers arrived. Okay, in the first half of the 18th century, it was very easy for Britishers to colonize India. Why? It was because in 1707 already Aurangzeb had died. Already Aurangzeb had wasted a lot of resources fighting Marathas, okay, Rajputs. So Aurangzeb bygot religious policies of religious bigotry. So those also resulted in weakening of the Pan-India Empire. So after the death of Aurangzeb, successors proved to be very useless. So the empire started declining. This was already there, means regional aspirations were already growing, and along with this Marathas and Afghan raids were also happening. Okay, along with this Maratha and Afghan raids were also happening. So what happened? The Indian empire, the overall pan-India, the Indian subcontinent weakened, from internally weakened. Okay, so after it weakened internally, it was very easy for Britishers to colonize India and establish an pan-India British colony. It was very easy. Okay, and those times were very different from today's times. Okay, in those days, today if some foreigner comes to India and tries to say that if suppose today in 2023, suppose a group of foreigners, okay, suppose 50,000 foreigners come to India today, or 1 lakh group of foreigners come to India today and try to rule over India, suppose, then will it be possible? 1 lakh, can 1 lakh foreigners rule over India today? It is not possible. Okay, 1 lakh, a group of 1 lakh foreigners or Europeans cannot rule over India, cannot rule over entire India in today's times. But in those times the situation was very different. The masses did not have any common sense. Okay, they were very much entrenched in their religion. Okay, they were not having any literacy or anything. Okay, religion used to be the education at that time. There was nothing more than religious education. Okay, Western education was not at all there. No scientific temper in orthodoxy, in all those things. Okay, they did not even have any nationalism kind of feeling in their hearts. Okay, no nationalism was there. No modern day nationalism was not there at that time. Okay, at max there was sub-nationalism. Sub-nationalism means we are from Bengal, like that. Okay, we are Bengalis. Such kind of nationalism was there. But in pan-India nationalism which we see today, that is the modern day nationalism. Okay, that was not there at that time. Okay, so what happened? As a result, a group of a few lakh foreigners was able to rule over entire India at that time. Okay, so when in 1100, when Qutbuddin Aibak and all those Delhi Sultanate rulers came to India, at that time also only a group of a few, means only 1% of population of those nobles and Muslims was there. Okay, those Qutbuddin Aibak and Delhi Sultanate, those people were only 1%. Okay, but they ruled over the entire 99% of the population. Okay, that means a group of 1% foreigners ruled over entire 99% of the population of India. Okay, because masses did not participate in politics, masses even did not know who is the present king. Only after they got the coins, or only after they saw the coins of the king, only after that did they understand that who is the ruler. Otherwise many people didn't knew that also at that time. Okay, so this is the thing. So in the modern world is very different from ancient and medieval world. Modern world is very different from ancient and medieval world. Okay, Marathas and Afghan did not have any sound economic policy, so they were dependent upon the collection of taxes. So they usually used to threaten their neighbors and enemies to pay taxes. In first half of the 18th century, Maratha and Afghan raids were common. This also led to the weakening of the empire, pan-India empire. Okay, means internal conflicts were there. What happened in South India? There was a triangular struggle in South India also. The triangular struggle in South India was between Mysore Marathas and Nizam of Hyderabad. Okay, means Mysore Marathas and Hyderabad you should write, or Nizam of Hyderabad. So a triangular struggle was between 1700 and 1750. Between 1700 to 1750, there was a triangular struggle in South India also between Mysore Marathas and Nizam. Travancore or Carnatic were other important powers. Okay, Travancore and Carnatic were other important powers, but not in this triangular struggle of South India. Travancore and Carnatic were other regions. Okay, I have already shown it to you in the maps again and again. Okay, Travancore, Carnatic, Mysore, Hyderabad, Marathas. I have already shown it to you in the maps. You should open your notebook and see yourself. Okay. So let me show it to you once again, but see. See over here. Okay, there was a triangular struggle between Marathas, Nizam. Okay, Marathas, Nizam and Mysore. So this was the triangular struggle of South India. Marathas, Nizam and Mysore. This was triangular struggle of South India. And Marathas, Afghans. Okay, Rohilkhand means Afghans. So Marathas, Afghans and Mughals. Okay, Delhi, Mughals. So Mughals, Afghans and Marathas were the power struggle in North India. Okay. So in South India, triangular struggle was there between Mysore, Marathas and Nizam. Travancore and Carnatic were other important powers. Those were in extreme south. Travancore means today's Kerala area. Carnatic means today's Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh area. Okay, coastal areas of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. That was Carnatic. And Travancore means modern day Kerala. Okay. So Travancore and Carnatic were other important powers, but not in this triangular struggle. They were not in this particular triangular struggle of South India, but they were other important powers. Okay. Among European companies also triangular struggle is seen. Okay. British and French and Dutch. Triangular struggle was going on between Dutch, French and British among European companies also. Okay. So main struggle was between British and French, who will win and establish supremacy. So there was struggle between British and French, that who will be superior to the other. Okay, who shall establish the supremacy over India. So that was a struggle between British and French. Finally British established supremacy and French lost. The three Carnatic war that were fought between British and French, those lead to British establishing supremacy. French lost those battles, those Carnatic wars. Okay. In the third Carnatic war, French lost. Okay. So finally British established their supremacy. We will learn about Carnatic wars in upcoming classes. So main struggle in British, French and Dutch was between British and French. This Dutch struggle is very few examples of British Dutch struggle, very few examples of French Dutch struggle. Okay, but British French struggle are very common. Okay. So main struggle was between British and French. that who will establish supremacy. Finally, British established supremacy. Marathas were the strongest power of India at that time, but they were having many limitations. Okay, we will learn about their limitations, that why they could not establish an all India empire. We will learn about that also. Okay, so Marathas were the strongest power of India at that time, but they were having many limitations. In 18th century India had no strong central authority. There was no single central authority in 18th century India. Maratha and Afghan raids were there along with foreign invasions. Already foreign invasions were, means how many factors are there? Look at this. Mughal empire declining. Okay, Maratha and Afghan raids weakening the empire. Foreign invasions again weakening the empire. Okay, weakening the country. So the empire was getting hollow from inside. Okay, it was getting very what we can say, weak from the inside. Okay, so there was no strong central authority. Also, law and order situation was also very bad. The king in itself was not safe. Okay, lot of kings were murdered and all those things. So law and order situation was also not good. Whenever there is a strong central authority, the law and order situation was good in history. In history, whenever you look at the situation, the law and order situation is best when the power is centralized to Delhi. At that time, the law and order situation is good. But as soon as there are fragments, the law and order situation becomes worse. Okay. So 18th century India had no strong central authority. Maratha and Afghan raids were there along with foreign invasions, thus weakening the empire. Okay. Now state of Awadh. Now where is Awadh? I have already shown it to you. Okay, now I won't show again and again. Below Nepal. Okay, below Nepal. State of Awadh was there below Nepal, in the south of Nepal, and towards the east of UP. East of UP, eastern part of UP, and south of Nepal. That particular area is Awadh. Okay. South of Nepal and eastern part of UP. That particular area is Awadh. The founder of the de facto independent state of Awadh was Sadat Khan. Okay. Founder of de facto independent state of Awadh was Sadat Khan. His title was Burhanul Mulk. Okay. Title of Sadat Khan was Burhanul Mulk. He was appointed the governor of Awadh in 1722. In 1722 he was appointed as the governor of Awadh. Okay, most probably by the Mughal emperor only. Yes, by the Mughal emperor only. Who else will appoint? So Mughal emperor only appointed him in 1722. Okay, so he became the de facto. He started ruling in a de facto sense. He also considered Mughal emperor as his sovereign, but in de facto sense he was ruling independently the state of Awadh. So Sadat Khan, title is Burhanul Mulk. He was appointed the governor of Awadh in 1722. Sadat Ali Khan. Okay, Sadat Khan. Either you call him Sadat Khan or you call him Sadat Ali Khan. Both are same. Okay. So Sadat Ali Khan was succeeded by his son-in-law. This is not important whether he was son-in-law or those things are not important. So Sadat Ali Khan was succeeded by his son-in-law Safdar Jung in 1739. Okay. So after Sadat Ali Khan, who came? Safdar Jung came in 1739. In 1748, Mughal Emperor Ahmad Shah, okay, means Ahmad Shah Bahadur, appointed him as his wazir. Appointed whom? Safdar Jung. Okay. In 1748, Safdar Jung, who was the successor of Sadat Ali Khan. After Sadat Ali Khan, Safdar Jung came. And as soon as Safdar Jung came in 1739, what happened? Yeah, after some years, after 9 years, okay, Safdar Jung was made the wazir at Mughal Emperor's court. At Mughal Emperor Ahmad Shah's court, Safdar Jung was made the wazir. Okay. After this, he and his successor came to be popularly known as Nawab Wazir. This is a very important point. Okay. After this, the successors of Safdar Jung and Safdar Jung. Okay, successors of Safdar Jung and his successors. those came to be known as Nawab Wazir. You must remember this thing. So Safdarjung and his successors of the state of Awadh, the de facto rulers of the state of Awadh, from Safdarjung onwards, they came to be known as Nawab Wazir. Okay. After his death, he was succeeded by his son Shuja-ud-Dawla. Okay. So after the death of Safdarjung, Shuja-ud-Dawla came to power, who had remained Wazir at Delhi from 1745 to 1775. Okay. So after Safdarjung, Shuja-ud-Dawla came. The very first was Saadat Ali Khan. Then after Saadat Ali Khan, Safdarjung came. After Safdarjung, who came? After Safdarjung, Shuja-ud-Dawla came. Okay. After Safdarjung, Shuja-ud-Dawla came. Then this Shuja-ud-Dawla participated in the Battle of Buxar 1764 along with Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II and Mir Qasim. Okay, we will learn about Battle of Buxar in the upcoming classes. Okay. So Shuja-ud-Dawla remained Wazir in Delhi after the death of Safdarjung. Okay. He participated, Shuja-ud-Dawla participated in the Battle of Buxar. You must remember this thing. So in Battle of Buxar, Shuja-ud-Dawla plus Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II and Mir Qasim, those three participated in the Battle of Buxar, which took place in 1764. I will tell you about Battle of Buxar in upcoming classes. Awadh. What is Awadh? I have already told to you. South of Nepal and eastern UP and central UP. Okay. So today's central UP and eastern UP is basically your Awadh. Okay. Lucknow region was the center of Awadh. Okay. Lucknow region. Where is Lucknow? You must be knowing this thing. If you are from UP, you must know this thing, that where is Lucknow. So Lucknow region was the center of Awadh. Okay. Lucknow region was basically your center of Awadh. Founder of the de facto independent state of Awadh was Saadat Ali Khan. Okay, so Saadat Ali Khan was the founder of de facto independent state of Awadh. Already told to you. Title of Saadat Khan was Burhanul Mulk. He was an able man as he behaved as de facto independent ruler practically. Okay. He was an able man. He was a capable man. Saadat Ali Khan was a capable man. Okay. He considered Mughal emperor as his sovereign in de jure sense. This is a common sense. I have already told you. Okay. So Saadat Ali Khan also considered Mughal emperor as his sovereign in de jure sense. Description of Shuja-ud-Dawla will come in Battle of Buxar. Okay. So after Saadat Ali Khan, Safdarjung came in Awadh, and after Safdarjung, Shuja-ud-Dawla came. Okay. So after Safdarjung, when Shuja-ud-Dawla came, but Safdarjung and Shuja-ud-Dawla means after Safdarjung, the Nawabs which were there in Awadh, those were called as Nawab Wazirs. Okay. After Safdarjung and his successors, those were called as Nawab Wazirs. Okay. So description of Shuja-ud-Dawla will come in Battle of Buxar. I have already written over here. Now the state of Hyderabad and Carnatic we will do sometimes after some time. Okay.